I don't know how you best, I figured like, yeah, we can go through like the whole thing. It's 8 minutes, but we say, what we want to say as far as, ranting on it, break it down point by point, like just, tell me when to stop.
Go!
As a PhD who knows the science, I'm in the category of the most vaccine hesitant group. Yes, PhDs are the most vaccine hesitant. Followed by people who have less than a high school degree because they know what they don't know and they don't trust their government. In fact, recent studies have shown that the vaccinated, especially with the Delta variant, and the unvaccinated have similar amounts of virus in their nose and throat.
What do you call it? She was a hydrochloroquine fan.
You know what? And I'm not surprised. And I figured that would probably be the case. I'm like, because she went on and on about the MMR and autism. And I was just like, okay, yeah, you did lose me at that point. Because I was just like, I can't. How are you a medical professional? And then, yeah, I graduated from such and such place, Michigan Medical University, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, how? How?
That just means you passed the test and read the material.
That's it. That's all that was. But she makes like some type of clear point where she wants to say, oh, the Tdap back in the day that we got was the real thing that fought against the supposedly infection or whatever. But the one they did now, that's the fake one or whatever kind of BS she wanted to say. I'm like, huh?
And I think that like in this thing, it does address the Tdap thingy.
Mm-hmm. Several times.
And and I was even telling my partner when I first watched this, I watched this on a stream of a friend of mine who is who's running for office. And so the whole reason why they had like their particular stream is to have a conversation about mandates and how she specifically was not for the mandates. My partner said that he thinks that she's not vaccinated. I'm not sure.
That's been my assumption.
I'm assuming that she's not. However, and especially like with some of like the points that I've seen, in social media and like some of the other videos addressing this issue, I don't know if she is. Regardless, one of the things that I told him specifically is that I was extremely disappointed in her because she played this particular testimony and it never came with any type of what's the word I'm looking? A disclaimer. Yeah, disclaimer concerning, the person who was putting forth this testimony in the first place.
Right. No, nor any empirical resources.
And I'm just like, I have an issue with any person that's like trying to be in a field where they are making decisions.
And so we are mandating that people get a vaccine that could actually make them more sick when they're exposed to the virus. In fact, this week, a paper came out, and what it showed is that with this Delta variant, when you're vaccinated, your body makes antibodies that are supposed to neutralize the virus. But they were supposed to neutralize the old variant. When they see this new variant, what they're doing is the antibodies are taking the virus and helping it infect the cells. All right, that science was just published this week. We need to be looking at the science, and we need our policy to reflect the science, and we also need it to reflect our rights.
Government bodies and government agencies that help to make decisions, they're relying on, testimonies from supposed experts without doing their due diligence to see who these people are. It is concerning. And it makes me think twice about, certain things about when it comes to, okay, what type of methodology are you utilizing if what they say is holding water?
Going through the comments in that section of that link video, because you sent this in the MP group chat, and I was like, oh, hell, something good. I know it is. And then, as I'm listening to her talk, I'm looking at the comments, and it's like, each person, comment after comment, is like, you know, just people seeking validation to, you know, them completely already being against this vaccination type of mandate type business. And I'm just like, you know, they are looking at this person who obviously has her doctorate, but they are taking to heart the wrong information from a supposed medical professional that's, you know, speaking on false information, or at least lack of appropriate information, because the whole notion of her going into, oh, it infects the mucosa, not the bloodstream, or it doesn't really prevent you from getting the infection in person. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know what? That's not, like, you're not saying the whole truth to it. You're not saying the added, you know, the whole step-by-step of how that infection occurs. And it behooves me to understand why, because I cut no slack for medical professionals at all. I can grant some type of leniency for a lay person, but this is just beyond understanding.
If you're just because, like, again, like, you may be well versed in the science doesn't necessarily mean that you are putting this particular science in practice every day.
Exactly.
That would definitely have a spin on how you may be interpreting the data that you are privy to, and also even your own personal biases when it comes to this particular infection, because you are not encountering it on a day-to-day basis. To me, that would make a difference in how you are presenting the information, especially like on your particular feelings concerning vaccines, let alone vaccine mandates, right?
Right. Let's go ahead and kick it off. I'll go ahead and play a portion of it. You tell me when to stop, or I'll stop when I got something to say.
If I believed in Jesus, I was like, why Jesus?
Lord have mercy. All right, let's go.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christina Parks. I received my PhD in cellular and molecular biology right here in the state of Michigan from University of Michigan Medical School. And so I'm very well versed in the science of both these mRNA, gene therapy, vaccines, this kind of technology, as well as what a vaccine is designed to do in the body, what it can do, what it can't do, and the fact that this is extremely complex science that has been oversimplified in the media to basically take away our freedom of choice.
That's you read my mind, because I was like, I'm going to stop right there. You got me. Yep. No, go ahead, please. By all means, you first.
Okay. So one of the things that we're already seeing as a person is arguing from the point of authority, and utilizing their particular expertise to, kind of like say to people who are like lay folk, like, like the average, Joe Blows, like you and I, or what have you, that, this is too complicated for you, sweetie, and heaven forbid if any person that has like a platform, like in the media, tries to explain this so that you can have a better understanding of what's going on with these particular vaccines, so that you can make a more informed choice about whether to get it or not. So immediately I'm already triggered, right? Because, you're basically calling people stupid. And, and so here's the thing about media specifically, like if we're talking about journalists who are reporting on the happenings of today, their job is to, utilize the best sources as possible to explain things to the general public.
Right.
Right. So I would hope, especially like you and I both know, like we get like extremely intelligent people in our midst all the time, especially when we do, our different shows, like if was on the nonprofits, on other various atheist shows, or even with the ACA, is that, a lot of people who happen to come on make themselves very, they make themselves very learned on a variety of subject matter. And so, like so oftentimes, like if we're having like discussions, especially if this is their wheelhouse, you heard me ask, can you please dumb it down for the average person in the room?
Yes. Dumb it down, speak louder for the person in the back. You know, you always hear about those crisis actors type deals. I want to say the same thing. I want to, but I will grant that benefit of the doubt to say this person genuinely feels how she feels, because we've heard news about various medical doctors that, you know, stand by the same type of information that she's proposing. But it's kind of, it's so profound that, you know, over 50, pretty much all of the medical associations stand by these vaccination mandates for healthcare workers. So I don't know what other science she's looking at or what other approaches she's coming at as far as, you know, turning this into more of a political stage and saying that, oh, this is enacting on people's personal freedoms. We shouldn't be pushing people to do such and such thing. But I digress.
Yeah, and then also too, like, then I want to like ask her specifically this question. So if they are, to your point, oversimplifying something that's very complicated, how is oversimplifying it so that the average person can make a decision on how to, if they're going to get vaccinated or not, is a way to take away our freedom of choice.
Right. Because the whole point is that you're supposed to, I won't say dumb it down, but break down that information so that the populace can understand this information that they're being fed and make that right decision, albeit it should be the appropriate decision of the appropriate and factually checked information based on what studies that we've done, the results, and how effective it has been for those that have been vaccinated. But if you're going to propose and say, well, we shouldn't be feeding people this stuff in the media, and, you know, CDC is only basing their science and information basing on in-house stuff that they've done, I'm like, you are misappropriating and misguiding people to make false understandings of what is the actual truth and what is going to eventually save us from this whole pandemic situation.
Right. And we already know that like organizations like the CDC and the WHO are not just relying on in-house information, right? Mm-hmm. They rely on a plethora of sources in order for them to, you know, to put out particular information to inform the public. So this is a preponderance of evidence that are coming from a variety of sources in order for them to give guidelines and also to give information about whatever it is that we're talking about. And it's noteworthy that both of these organizations, oftentimes when they are putting out information, is they list all the references that they are getting it from.
Thank you.
Which is something that she don't do a lot, but we will get there.
We will, girl. We're not even a minute in.
I know,
right? See, folks, this is already too much. We're not even a minute in. Let's move on.
Does the vaccine for DTaP prevent transmission? No. Does the vaccine for flu prevent transmission? No. Do the vaccines for COVID prevent transmission? No. In fact, they were never designed to do that. All right, so you're asking, what about this 95% effectiveness? If you look at those clinical trials, they do not say that they prevent transmission. They expressly say that they're measuring whether they attenuate symptoms. So they're 95% effective based on their clinical trials at attenuating symptoms for the first variant, which is essentially gone in our population. Right now, the predominant variant is the Delta, and CDC Director Walensky basically said that these vaccines have no ability to prevent infection by and transmission of the Delta variant.
The COVID vaccine, nor any other vaccine, flu, MMR, Tdap, what have you, they don't prevent transmission. You can still get sick. You can still get infected. They lessen the symptoms, which she does state later on in her statement, fair, but there was never have been a case or claim from CDC, WHO, no other medical organization that has basic understanding at the very least of vaccinations that make claim that this will totally prevent you and keep you super shielded from ever getting infected. There's never been a claim. Vaccines don't work that way. They lessen the aggressiveness and possible mortality of you either becoming super sick are dying from that infection. That's it.
That's all. And another thing, even if we're talking about specifically transmission, the more people who are vaccinated and who don't necessarily have it is also going to lessen the possibility of transmission.
Herd immunity.
Herd immunity, right. Like a perfect example, I keep on bringing this up because it's a great example, is polio.
Thank you.
It took a very long time, I think about like a total of like 30, 40 years to really get polio under control. I remember specifically that my sister in my most immediate family was the last person to receive the polio vaccine in 1963. By the time that my other sister was born in 69 and myself in 77. Yes, I just gave away my age. It's all good. But none of us had to get vaccinated specifically with polio because by that time they eradicated the disease. And the reason being is because more and more people were vaccinated enough in order for it to lessen the transmission rate from one person to another to the point where the virus had nowhere to go. Remember the way the viruses work. Viruses need hosts in order for them to be, I don't want to say alive because they are not necessarily alive.
I guess you could say, successful.
Yeah, for them to be able to be in an environment and do the things that viruses do, they need a host. They can't do it on their own. Good example, HIV. HIV, once it actually enters a person, the first thing that HIV does is it seeks out CD4 cells or immunocells in order for it to attach itself to it. It injects their RNA or their information into that particular cell so it can replicate to look like the virus, okay? And it keeps doing that over and over and over again until all the immunocells are completely compromised in order to look like the virus, and you have no immunity whatsoever in order for you to be able to fight it, right?
Precisely.
Right. So, and this is basically the basic way that viruses work. They attach themselves to cell after cell, inject their information, their RNA into those particular cells to replicate itself, and they compromise the immune system or the immunocells.
And now, obviously the efficacy of the vaccine, the COVID vaccine now does dip further because of the strain has changed, but that's all due in part because no one from the beginning wanted to listen and become more and more. We couldn't get enough people to become more and more vaccinated to damper down on the original variant that we had. Now with all these multipliers, all these different mutations and strain, and I think the Lambda one, when I saw it, came from Peru. Now we're having more issues.
And also too, like, let's also be aware, in the continent of South America. I'm about to say South Africa, child, my bad. No, I know a little bit of geography, people. South America, you have varying ways on how these governments are handling the virus. Yes. I wish our great friend Mateo Atea was on with us so that he can explain how badly a lot of these South American countries are handling COVID-19. Brazil is a great example of not necessarily, first off, when it comes to who gets the vaccine and who don't get the vaccine, that's a whole political issue. You still got people who won't believe it's a thing, and all types. And then like the government is not necessarily pouring into the resources to actually get, life-saving materials like PPE to the people, like masks, and you have like different mandates on how like even masks are being able to be regulated, right? Whether you wear them, if you don't wear them, if place is open, if it's not open, etc. So since there's so many conflicting, regulations and issues and things of that nature, you have a virus that is really spiraling and it's giving more time in order for it to mutate, because viruses are in a perpetual state of evolution. And if they have continuously, if they're continuously able to not be addressed in a holistic manner, they're going to continue to mutate and kill off hosts if the hosts don't necessarily have an immunity against it.
I would say the number one protection in which what this vaccine does, or what most vaccine does, that buildup of antibodies is necessary for your body to recognize something new that it has never experienced ever in its life. So that's the same kind of thing that happens when a mother is breastfeeding a child, or even in the womb when the mother is, eating and, blood and everything exchanges, all the nutrients exchanges through the placenta and all of the vessels and everything like that. So vessels, arteries and veins and things like that. You get all of that antibodies, you get all of that, memory from the mother and develop that for yourself. But once you're introduced to the outside world, once you're outside of that womb, once you come into contact with some new type of infection, your body doesn't have natural immunity to fight that off. It doesn't recognize what that other shit is. You need something that is made by science, made by these vaccines, which serves its purpose to provide you that, I guess you can say, new math to the math that's already inside you. That added math helps with developing and building up that, formula so that it can fight off all of the strange stuff that your body has never met before.
So do these viruses do the vaccines prevent the virus from infecting and replicating in the nose and nasopharynx? No. They've only been shown to prevent that replication in the lungs. They're different. The mucosa is very different than the lungs. It's very different than the blood. You inject it to the blood, you make antibodies in your blood. The virus isn't infecting your blood. It's infecting your mucosa, and you don't produce any IgA to neutralize it.
Wrong. 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 Wrong.
I was like,
wrong.
I'm going to defer to you to this one.
That's when I started to itch. I was like, oh my God, can't breathe. Okay. So obviously, yes, the testing matters as far as COVID testing. It is, swabbing your mucosa, or you can also test for COVID through your blood as well. So the infection does start, because it is droplet contact. It starts and it gets introduced to your body through your airways, nasopharynx. Obviously it hits your mucosa first, but it does eventually get yourself introduced into the bloodstream.
Right. I was just thinking too, like when she was saying like this, like it's only introduced to your mucosa, not to your, it's only known to, what did you say specifically? It's only known to
be introduced, infect your mucosa, not your blood, and not your lungs, or some crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, and I was just like, but what about people who actually develop pneumonia because of COVID?
COVID pneumonia.
My mother had COVID pneumonia. I would conjecture. Like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a PhD molecular biochemist person. I'm just a little case manager. But I know a little something. And I've been wondering to myself, I'm like, okay, well that's the case. Like, how does this? So if we don't have a transit system within our body called blood to move from one place to another, how does it spread out in order for it to affect the system? It has to move. It has to move some kind of way.
I know you recently made a blog post. I read through it just in regards to this type thing. So this obviously hits home for you as per what you just stated. So, I'm sure it's even more incredibly frustrating since it's hit so much home to you than it has for me in regards to all this mess.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, and again, like it just really just shows like this whole thing about misrepresenting the argument when we're talking about how these particular vaccines work, let alone the infection itself. Like, all infections are going to affect organs and blood in some shape, way, or form. Right. And just for it just to say, oh, it just affects this part and not that part, like that's obviously wrong. Okay, so like we both saw this disproving, what is it called? I think it was called disproving Deplatform disease, who was specifically addressing this for point by point her testimony in front of the Michigan State Congress. And I would like to read specifically what they said about the mucosal immunity by the mRNA vaccines.
Oh, please.
Okay, so it says that Parks argues, seemingly from the basis of acellular pertussis, and she will get into that a little bit later, so this is just a lead up to that. Vaccines against COVID-19 that are mRNA vaccines cannot be protective against transmission, which we've already established that's false, because they do not induce mucosal immunity. One way to profile mucosal immunity, at least its humoral components in the upper airways, is through examining saliva for the presence of neutralizing antibodies. At the mucosal surfaces, most antibodies is indeed IgA. There is a relevant caveat here, though, in that antibodies to I believe that's commensal microbiota may also cross-react with the spike receptor binding domain, and thus whether these are elicited from the vaccines is not confirmed. Though the fact that the levels of salivary antibodies does vary with the various vaccines used is encouraging as far as mucosal immunity resulting from intramuscular vaccinations. IgG and IgA antibodies against the spike protein in vaccines did prove capable of neutralizing a VSV pseudovirus expressing the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. It's worth noting that even parental, e.g., intramuscular routes of administration have been shown in the past to elicit varying degrees of mucosal immunity. High levels of antibodies, mainly IgG, are actively imported into the lungs and then rise to the upper airways via the mucociliary clearance.
Okay. Big words, a lot of words.
For anyone who is interested, it is known that mRNA vaccines can induce circulating monomeric IgA production against the spike protein. However, it is very difficult to study mucosal immunity relative to the symptomatic compartment, which is why information on this more scarce and preprints are only really starting to trickle in now. I, the author, will also note that Parks was largely correct in classifying SARS-CoV-2 as mucosal respiratory pathogen. Viremia, virus in the blood, is rare, generally only occurring in very severe disease. Still, there are open questions about its ability to invade other organs, the brain, pancreas, kidney, and the role that retains viral reservoirs may play in persistent COVID-19 symptoms.
Right. So basically this type of virus has its ways of infecting certain parts of organs in the body, but and since how Dr. Parks is trying to demonstrate, it's only just showing itself in mucosa, not the blood, she's relinquishing the fact or leaving out the other side of it, in which you pretty much explain in this rebuttal from this article, which is good because I think Justin had put me to that reference too when someone was trying to combat what she was saying and all that.
Right. I was just like, rebuttal.
Right. Exactly. That's good though. That's good as far as, breaking down. I appreciate, is that author A medical professional or...
Shout out to Edward Nirenberg. Is it Nirenberg or Nirenberg? Shout out to you, Edward, who I have a hard time saying your last name. My bad, sir. But shout out to you, because, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to rebut what dear Dr. Parks has to say in this particular 8 minutes that we have spent a lot of time trying to
Yes.
This is why I don't get on TikTok, but go ahead.
See, and lack of a God knows we need more people to do this.
I don't know what that means. I mean, like, if the data, sir, is showing that more people who happen to be filling up the hospitals and getting sick and dying from COVID are unvaccinated people, and okay, I will try to regulate my language concerning the word blame. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to blame anybody for anything. I'm just saying this, and I'm going to give an example. If you are driving a vehicle and you happen to be driving and don't have your seatbelt on and you get into an accident, what is the possibility that without your seatbelt that you could possibly suffer more injuries because you don't have it on versus having it on?
The risk is higher.
And so with the data that we are seeing concerning people who are filling up the hospitals, these are people who happen to be unvaccinated. That is not a blame. That is not a you. That is what it is. So again, if we do have some type of protection, like seatbelts are not going to keep you from getting into accidents, right? They're not going to stop accidents from happening. What they do is they mitigate the possibility of your ass getting injured if you happen to get into one.
Or flying out that front shield window. Because that is the equivalent of you dying in the hospital without being unvaccinated with the COVID vaccine versus someone that is in the hospital but has been vaccinated and come walking out of that hospital maybe a week later.
Correct.
That's the difference.
That's the difference. I keep saying this and I'm going to keep on saying this. The vaccine saved my mother's life. You cannot tell me that it did not. I cannot imagine what type of, conversations that I would be having with people now if she was not vaccinated with all the comorbidities that she possesses. Mm-hmm. She did not have the vaccine that was protecting her against COVID, really just doing a number on her. It was bad, but it could have been so much worse. And she's progressing so much better right now. And I would have to say, I would have to give it up to the vaccine that really helped provide some protection for her so that she wouldn't be, dead, So I think, and also data substantiates those particular things as well.
As a PhD who knows the science, I'm in the category of the most vaccine hesitant group. Yes, PhDs are the most vaccine hesitant, followed by people who have less than a high school degree because they know what they don't know and they don't trust their government.
That's a part, that both you and I are very, very, interested and passionate about.
Yes, very.
The other group that is very vaccine hesitant are African Americans. 70% of African Americans have not taken this vaccine. Why? Because they don't trust their government. Do they have reason not to trust their government? Well, between the years of 1930 and 1970, the CDC conducted the Tuskegee experiment, where they took untreated males with syphilis, and they refused to treat them. Even after antibiotics became available, they still did not treat them, and they did not tell them that they had syphilis. They told those people that they were there to secure their health, and they did not secure their health. They abused them. You say, well, that was in the past, although I don't think 1970 was that long ago. Well, in 2012, whistleblower William Thompson came forward and said, we published a study that said MMR does not cause autism, but we lied. In fact, we shredded data that showed that when Black boys are vaccinated on time, they have increased rates of autism diagnosis. And we shredded it and we left it out of the paper. As an African American and a PhD, I want to ask each of you, are we going to exclude 70% of African American people from the workforce and from education?
The unfortunate history of Black people in America and medical health has been unsurprisingly awful.
Right.
It has been awful how we've been treated. I mean, we're just speaking for ourselves. Obviously, other demographics have been through worse.
Treated shitty. Yeah.
Shitty. We've been treated shitty.
Yes, we have.
And yes, there is very high trueness to how we are not only discouraged from seeking appropriate medical attention, but just flat out disheartened to even trust medical professionals because of that history, because of even the initial treatment when an African-American woman or a man walks into a medical office and how their symptoms are treated lesser than what they are genuinely feeling.
Right.
The advocacy is not there. Right. That, it's just, you'll get over it, or there's no appropriate treatment or guidance for their care. And lo and behold, we suffer from we're more susceptible to certain medical pre-existing conditions like hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and various other diseases that impact us more heavily than other demographics. Right. And just to add on to the notion that medical health guidance has not been there for us, right. But that does not mean what she says coincides to what medical standards are now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
I know.
I wrote specifically about these arguments about vaccine hesitancy and even healthcare hesitancy amongst African American populations, citing the horrible racism that we are still experiencing in America today, and also citing historical references concerning how African Americans were treated in various ways throughout time, and how they were treated or even experimented on and the like. Henrietta Lacks is a good one. Your cells are spread all over the world in order for you to, help to treat uterine cancer, and your family has not gotten any type of compensation whatsoever for this. Okay, we know that. The Tuskegee experiment, where these men were not treated for syphilis, even though that at the particular time, penicillin was an antibiotic that was very much so available, that has been shown to be effective against syphilis infection. They were just denied it. Okay.
Right.
Even like when we talk about like the father of gynecology, I think his name John Merriam, if I'm not mistaken, who experimented on enslaved women without anesthesia. Okay, like if you get even a chance to like read some of the narratives in his notes, where he talked about these women screaming in pain, and other doctors just looked at their naked bodies and said nothing. They just sat there and just watched, as people were being used, probed, and stuck, and all these particular things under the guise of white men without any advocacy whatsoever. And they could do it because slavery was very much so alive and well. It was legal, and Black people who were enslaved were not human beings. They were chattel. Racism in healthcare, especially towards African American people, is a real thing, but it is not relevant here.
No.
And the reason why it's not relevant here is because, for one, this particular vaccine, number one, is not experimental, and it's not only being doled out to African American patients. This is a vaccine that is available for free to anybody and everybody, whether if you are a citizen or not, to be vaccinated against a disease that could potentially kill you. And another thing that has to be noted that she does not mention whatsoever is the disproportionate rate of mortalities that has happened in the African American community because of COVID-19. And it happens because of all the ills that befall Black people when it comes to the United States. You know, we suffer from healthcare deserts. There's not, clinics and hospitals are not as prevalent in our neighborhoods as they are in white neighborhoods, period. Food deserts are a thing in our neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Lack of parks, lack of trees, you know, other things that actually create a more hospitable environment. You know, there's a whole thing called Cancer Alley in Louisiana. You know, matter of fact, I'm going to do a stream with Pale Blue Mama about environmental racism. And I was even looking up, different statistics about, Black folk, Latinx folk, and other marginalized communities have a tendency to live closer to pollutant, chemical-ridden factories that are oftentimes ignored, or the people are ignored when they go to the EPA to say that, hey, these places are killing us. Okay? So this is a very real thing. This is a very, very real thing. And because of all these things are the ones that affect us, this also has attributed to the disproportionality of mortalities in our particular community. So You mean to tell me that if you have a possibility of having a treatment that's available and a vaccine that's a possibility to lessen your chance of being able to get this deadly disease that has affected us disproportionately over everybody, that you're going to deny it or tell people they shouldn't take it? So what do you want me to do? Either you want to vaccinate me so it can lessen my chances of getting this particular disease, or you just want me to die.
Transportation and accessibility is a hazard. It's a detriment to us.
Yes.
When we are forced to live in areas where, property value is very low, but they're in areas in which you just said it. Air quality is extremely poor. The food deserts are just almost on every corner. There is no healthy public resource for recreational, exercise or clean air, anything like that.
Right.
We are enclosed in these claustrophobic, heavily populated, polluted areas on purpose. And then they look at us and say, oh, just pull yourself up in your bootstraps and get to another area. We can't, because then you got the added compounding issue of the socioeconomic issue, where you can't build yourself up and strive to get yourself to a better place where you can afford that higher level of healthcare, or where you can afford that higher level of living. Hell, the majority of Black businesses were hurt. A lot of Black businesses were hurt because of this fucking pandemic in the first place.
%, as opposed to 17% of white businesses.
And you wonder why there's a problem. And you wonder why there is, I don't even think it's so much so that has to deal with hesitancy. I'm sure it's there, but the accessibility is one of those top things that makes it an even greater issue for even being COVID tested for most people.
Right.
And the fact that the availability to get yourself there, because you got to work like almost your whole fucking day, or work 2 and 3 jobs in a day, 7 days a week.
Right. That's a thing too. I mean, especially if you're even talking about like, you know, the rate of employment concerning like what type of jobs that our particular group happens to hold are like oftentimes like frontline employment, where you're not going to have as much flexibility to be able to go take time out to do things like go see a doctor. I'm just saying.
I'm so glad you did this with me.
I got biscotti and froze, big boss like I'm rose. Ice and Wendy's, that's a dome. Low baddie, yeah, she homemade. Rep my city at the home game. Up and down and go both ways. And the sprinter is taking up both lanes. Hoppin', we zooming, the package be booming. Yeah, we got it, we got it, got it. She picky and choosing in love with the moment. Yeah, we got it, we got it, got it. They cannot do what we doing, you see how we moving. We got it, we got it, got it. Mess with the squad, you try it. Go against us, I highly doubt it. All of my bros, we got it, got it. They know for sure, we got it, got it. Been on the road, we got it, got it. We cannot go without it, out it. Mess with the squad, you try it. Go against us, I highly doubt it. Been on the road, we got it, got it. We cannot go without it, out it.
Word to your mother.
Word to your mother.